Hi, Ghadi.
Hi,
How are you today?
great.
I want to start off by telling you it's a pleasure to have you on set with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's like talking to a whole different part of my community and my country, just speaking to you with your age, with your perspective, with your platform. So thank you for giving me the
It's a
chance.
pleasure. I'm glad that you said all of these things. I think we can do a great job today and share a lot of
Hopefully,
messages and a lot of your ideas with the younger generation and especially a global audience.
hopefully.
Usually, I don't like to read off my cards. They're not here for that purpose, but I'm going to start with a personal message I wrote for you to try and explain why we have you on today.
Okay.
In times of war and crisis, amidst all the noise, there are voices that get lost and there are those that cut through it. You do more than report the facts. You have the courage and strength to tell the stories that matter, the ones people need to hear even when they are difficult. You've seen the realities of wars, the struggles of nations, and the resilience of people up front. Today, this conversation is not just to explore your journey, but also to reflect on where we are heading.
Um, First of all, it's not nations. To me, it's all one nation. This is the root of everything that I have done and that I would do until the day I die. It's coming out of the belief of the unity of this nation and this cultural hub that is our nation. Our nation was born way before the World War I or II, before the colonizing entities chose to draw and segregate demographically, based on religions, based on sects, based on smaller entities. I don't see any difference in terms of pain or culture or past or future from Palestine to Syria, passing through Lebanon and also extending to Iraq. Because once in the history, even up until the fall of the Ottoman Empire and the Ottoman occupation, we were always governed as one. Because economically, socially, politically, in every sense, even if you want to speak about the transit and the transportation and the cultural exchange, this hub that used to be called Bilad al-Sham is different from the Arab Gulf and it's different from Northern Africa. And this whole entity, to me, is the actual extended nation where I have witnessed wars. I haven't covered wars in Africa, and there are many wars and a lot of injustice. I haven't done that in Ukraine or in far parts of Asia. Injustice is all across the world, but I have only covered places and been there in places where I feel it's my nation and where I feel that if I die, I would be just another native Lebanese, Syrian, Palestinian, Iraqi that would die here. I wouldn't really call myself courageous enough of a journalist to be covering war zones hadn't I been emotionally, personally involved. So I, yes, went to Gaza. Yes, been to Yemen. Yes, been to Iraq and to Syria across war zones. Yes, but I wouldn't do it elsewhere.
I'm glad we have the clarification. Many of our viewers would like to see that you don't discriminate between nations and you take it as one single nation and you are wherever oppression is and you stand up for what's right. Now, as you know, the show is called Enta. Enta, translated to English for those who don't know, means who are you? And our mission here today is to try and explore behind the journalist Ghadi and to try and understand what led her to where she is today.
Yes.
So the first question I have for you today is, can you tell me about your early childhood and your upbringing?
Well, I'm an only girl. I have two elder brothers.
Okay. So you're the youngest?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think this had a lot to do with my personality. Growing up, I was somehow a tomboy.
Okay.
And I always felt empowered and supported because there's an age difference between me and my siblings. So, having elder brothers gave me more confidence in speaking up, sometimes outside the house and sometimes inside the house to a greater audience of boys and girls. And this is very important in empowering young girls because many of the communities in West Asia, in the Middle East, in Lebanon, a girl is brought up in a way where speaking up is not girly or it's not acceptable or it's not polite enough.
It doesn't follow the stereotypes.
So I think this part of my childhood molded who I was growing up and who I became as an adult. And also another part, I was born in Tripoli, not in my village, because my parents were forcibly displaced under political oppression for having different ideas from their community. And this was during the 70s. So I come from two displaced Maronites who lived in Tripoli, the Islamic northern capital. They found refuge to their political freedom over there during the civil wars, and they met over there, and I was born over there. And then at the age of 9, we went back to our village where it was acceptable to live once again after the folds of the civil war were like under the table again in the Lebanese society. So we came back to our village in Kura, northern Lebanon, where I would spend my next 7-8 years of age. And then for the university, I went down to Dahi, to the southern suburb of Beirut at the age of 17, where I started writing my own journey. So I don't know which part of my childhood you'd like me to elaborate on.
In your household, what kind of household did you grow up in? Was journalism and politics a household topic on a daily basis, or did your exploration from going from your originally where your parents are from to another area in Lebanon change your view?
No, actually, speaking to continue and elaborate, I said both my parents under political oppression were displaced because they were politically active and they had different opinions, different than the crowds. They both are secular. They both are driven towards Palestine, towards the liberation movements, especially in the times of 70s and 80s. A lot of the young generation in Lebanon was driven very passionately against the actual occupation because Israel had been an occupying force at that time. So my parents were both politically active. They both fell in love with each other in their activism. So we were just the fruit of that. It was very easy to become politically passionate in this household because personally and as a family, you are undergoing the oppression and the struggle, the rebellion is in every day of your life. You're not being accepted. You're not being. You're really paying the price of having a different view and having a free view other than the crowd. So I was always political. Journalism was never on the table, though, because my parents both have a good language. My mom is trilingual. She teaches French for a hobby and she has a great Arabic. She used to write poetry. She comes from a very linguistically articulate family. My grandfather was the same, and so on. And my father also has a great taste for literature. So we always used literature and read and consumed communication and arts in our house. But I remember as a kid I used to watch like 7 news bulletins
at a very young age
next to my dad, because my dad would watch all these and would have some opinions, and they would discuss with my mom or my brother or the guests that we had. So being political, I don't even can track how young I was when I started having stances on politics.
It's like when you first opened your eyes, it was just right in front of you.
Yeah, I mean, at the age of 6 or 7, I had my views on Palestine.
Really?
Yes.
So your parents are proud of you today. You're a very big reflection, I guess, on what they think.
I think they are proud of me, and I think they didn't expect for one of us to go that far, of the 3 children that they had. I mean, they were politically active, but not like me. They did get somewhere in their politics, but not as far as I got. They didn't actually go to Palestine. I think they're very proud at the extent of my sincerity to my upbringing, but even they didn't expect me to go that far.
So I can understand that you grew up in a political household, you had views from a young age,
yeah.
But the bigger question is what stemmed this love for journalism, to be a war correspondent? Was there something that happened along this journey, along this way?
It got accumulated.
Okay.
You know, I think the first time I wrote something public, I was 13 years old, and I wrote it to the municipality of our village. It was like an article telling them that this is air pollution, what you're doing, and I cannot accept that there were like pesticides that would be sprayed across the streets for mosquitoes. And they would do this in the summer, and we would all rush inside the homes. And I was like, this is pollution. Why are you doing this to us? So I think this was my first article. I was 13 years old, and the head of the municipality called my dad, and he said, like, Joseph, if you have a problem with us, you can say it. He said, what happened? He said, your daughter wrote an article. And in the end, they stopped doing that for a while for my article.
So you had an impact.
I think, yeah, the idea when you get the power from writing something, it gets addictive on so many levels. On a personal dopamine, self-satisfactory kind of level, when you work on something and it gets published and people look at it, this is so self-satisfactory. Sure. And there's also the idea that, okay, so if I say something and I believe in it and it's right, and I say it out there, it can change something. So when you get that taste, you would never stop. And I think ever since then, even in my high school, I had written something and I got a prize for writing it. And then at the age of 17 and a half, I published in the first newspaper. So I started speaking up louder for greater audiences wherever I went. By the time I had a name as a journalist in a Safir newspaper, the Arab Spring broke out. And all of our generation, all of us got amplified, Twitter became something that could change, Twitter activists overthrew Mohammed Hosni Mubarak, the president of Egypt and Tunisia, and things were changing around us. So when things got to Syria, we were covering all that, but when things got to Syria, I started feeling that I could be, other than a consumer of the news, I could go and see, because this is my community as well, Syria is my greater nation, I can go and see these people. And I actually suggested that and
to the newspaper?
To Hussein Ayoub at the time. He's still a very respectable veteran journalist that I really highly respect. He's from South Lebanon, by the way. He has a platform of his own now called 180 Post, and I write on it when I feel like writing articles. I was so young, and I was telling him, like, I'm willing to wear a burqa and to go to Dar'a and to see what's actually happening on the ground. And he was like, I'm willing to actually suggest that to the publisher, Talal Salman, the late Talal Salman. So he went there and he said, I have a suggestion, we're going to send this kid. And they sent me to Syria, and I started writing without any red lines, which got me into a lot of trouble, but actually made my first...
You went during the Civil War?
I went in 2011. My first article was in March, and I tracked it. I spoke to the opposition figures. I got arrested for that. I got deported for that, and then I came back, and then so it was a very controversial coverage since day one. It ended after 4 months by deporting.
Were there any risks in your life on this journey?
I think many times.
Did you consult with a family member or your family where you took this decision? So is it safe to say in some way, and respectfully, you're a bit stubborn on your decisions and what you personally believe?
First of all, big time. And at that time, I was 20 years old. So my passion was driving me more than my logic. Okay. And I think I think there are a million quotes about how things you do in your teenagehood and in your 20s, you don't do it. Like how you're supposed to be a Marxist in your 20s, but then...
Things change around in your 30s and 40s.
Yeah, whatever. Why? Because you're always like more passionate, more enthusiastic, So I think I would do it all again, but today... the things I would calculate things differently. When I went and I started covering things on the ground in Syria, it was exactly the time when people were arrested and sometimes killed for speaking up. I wrote articles as a 20-year-old that would result in banning the newspaper in Damascus that day. Not once, not twice, but countless times while living in Damascus. So this was really daring, and it ended up by me being like taken to the borders. No, I didn't imprison me. They deported me and they banned me from coming back to Syria, but that didn't stop me. I started going to the areas where there's no Syrian state at the time or Syrian army, where people have free zones, whether it's at the Lebanese borders or the Turkish borders, and my journalism didn't stop.
I can understand that you were driven by your passion, but there has to be a sense of fear in every human being, a fear of life, a fear to lose your life. Was that fear not there, or was it absent?
It was always there, of course. I'm not an invincible dinosaur. But I think there was a lot of confidence with a lot of impulsiveness, and to a certain time, like, you know, when you go to the gym and you start lifting weights, first of all you start with like 3 kilograms and
Start
then
to go
yeah.
up.
So for me, the groundwork, the very sophisticated groundwork, did not start by me getting into Aleppo,
Okay.
where I got arrested and kidnapped and almost died or whatever. No, it started by me getting to Damascus, writing an article with Luay Hussein, with Hassan Abdel spending 3-4 days and coming back to Beirut, and then more, and then I rented an apartment, and then I started writing regularly, and then after that I went to Qusayr, and then I went to Qalamun, and then I went to Turkey, into Aleppo. So in general, your skills with the people on the ground, with your fixers on the ground, with how to maintain your security, whether to tell 2 journalists in Lebanon, to tell your family members, or to tell your brother who's not in Lebanon, but maybe he can help you in case you get stuck somewhere. So I didn't ever throw myself out there without calculating.
The risk on your life.
But really, I took risks, and I am a believer. I'm a very spiritual person, and my spirituality grew way bigger because of these near-death experiences. I was very lucky in many times.
If I'm not mistaken, you've been to Palestine, specifically Gaza, as you just said. And, you know, whenever we get a guest on the show, we have to conduct research like any other platform. And one of the things that I came across, which I need to fact check with you, and you can tell me if it's true, is that you were in a underground tunnel for Hamas, or am I mistaken?
No.
You were in a tunnel at some point.
Yeah, I entered and exited Gaza via a tunnel.
Via a tunnel, so it wasn't
Yes.
a Hamas tunnel.
This was part of the reporting and the documenting that I did, and I wasn't the only journalist that did this. I think Ghassan bin Jiddo did that for Al Jazeera before me. And it was at a time to actually document the siege.
Okay.
Gaza was besieged, and Rafah was part of that. It wasn't possible for me as a journalist to enter Gaza because the Israelis do not allow you, even though it is an Egyptian border. So the only way for me to get into Gaza, as per the invitation of my fellow colleagues from the radio, صوت الشعب, صوت الحرية, in Gaza, the only way for me to get there was to get to the Rafah area and then to be taken into the Rafah houses, where I would wait and get into the tunnel and get inside Gaza. And the way back was something similar. I got to the Gaza and Rafah. There's the Rafah on the side of Gaza and on the side of Egypt. So the Gaza and Rafah part, I went to something like a border with like a checkpoint, and I paid a little amount of money, where I got a paper that could allow me to enter via the tunnel or to exit via the same kind of tunnel into Egypt.
Just correct me, all of these interactions were with Palestinians and not Israelis.
There are no Israelis over there. At the time, in 2013, January 2013, there had been a ceasefire for a few months. So it wasn't as dangerous as one might think. I wasn't very courageous to do that. I waited in the same room as a Tunisian man and other people who were coming for solidarity to Gaza. People, journalists, activists, humanitarian activists and artists were always flowing inside Gaza through these tunnels in acts of solidarity. And these tunnels were the lifelines that through which medicine, people, food, and books sometimes were getting into the besieged part of Palestine.
Going back a bit to your childhood, if you did not pursue journalism, would there be anything else you could think, just looking back?
I wanted to be a lawyer.
It suits you.
Yeah, I wanted to be a lawyer, and I always wanted to be someone who speaks up, and speaks up on behalf of someone who doesn't have the means to express their vulnerability or their victimhood.
Was there any events or figures that inspired you at a young age?
I think on a personal level, growing up, I have witnessed a lot of injustice. whether it's to people around me or to the community, or like the idea of being taken away from your house because, or being killed at some places. Some people around our community were killed just for holding the same thoughts that we did. So I think this part really shaped the kind of trigger that I had, and I think it's very good and very healthy to speak about
It
things.
shaped your character.
No, it really made a trigger into me, because I don't act as if we're all healed. We are systematically traumatized people. We are sons and daughters of war, sons of daughters of people who have been through war. So basically there's a generational trauma out there. And I think it's my way of dealing with it. It has always been my way of dealing with it.
Is that trigger still there?
Big time. Yeah.
Is it stronger? Or is it dimmed?
No, the trigger is there, but you get more immune. You get more tools how to funnel these triggers into calmer or more productive methods, or more like valid ways. You know, it's not always, for example, all the journalism that I've done in Syria could have been done with less danger and less nervous trauma for me and my family. I could have avoided being kidnapped or deported or criticized very harshly, or undergone character assassination and so on. I could have avoided all that, maybe in avoiding some mistakes in terms of articulating your thoughts, or like using social media, or even exchanging ideas with people. So you live and you learn. Today, these triggers are more manageable, but they're not done, especially when each season it opens up a new war, a new genocide just right across the street in Gaza, in a place where you've seen. I mean, I struggle to deal with the reality that everyone I've seen and everywhere I've been is not there. I don't want to normalize the feeling, because normalizing that means it's okay. It's not okay, and we're not supposed to be normal. I'm not supposed to be a normal person knowing that Al-Rimal, Jabalia, Beit Lahiya, Rafah, the inside old town of Gaza, all the places I fell in love with have been destroyed. And all the people who were there, they were either forced outside or starved to death or killed and bombed in their homes. And no, I want to safeguard these triggers, because not having them at a certain point means forgetting or forgiving or normalizing a genocide. So I don't want to get over it. I want to remain as angry. I want to remain as nervous sometimes. I want to break out in tears in interviews. I don't want to deny it, because denying it is one step.
Normalizing it.
It's one step at actually being complicit. You know, making it normal, letting everyone, oh please, I don't want to I don't want to harm your peace by speaking about the dead children. No, I want to disrupt. I want to harm your peace by telling you it's just right here, and you're complicit in being silent. This has been my stance on the war and the genocide in Gaza since day one.
How many days did you spend in Palestine?
8.
You interacted with Palestinians themselves?
Of course. The Gaza is all Gazans.
Is there any story or any interaction that left a long-lasting effect?
There is one that there are two that I would never forget. Never forget, and it gives me the chills just to talk about these humans. Yeah. There's Brahim Abu Thuraya. Google him. I was walking in Jabalia. I had a handy cam with me, and I'm wearing my UFO. This is my ground reporting style. I'm by myself with the journalists that are hosting me, like comrades, colleagues, you know. So we're walking around, and I see a man whose legs have been amputated, and like from high above, you know, it's only the waist down, and he's on a car, washing it.
So he doesn't have legs?
No. He's climbing with his hands all around the car and washing the car. With all I don't know, and I'm not skilled enough to wash my car like the way Ibrahim Abu Thuraya was washing the car. And I was like, I remember Basil, my colleague, Basil Tanani. I was like, Basil, what is that? He said, this is Brahim. He's been injured in the most recent war. Yes, and this is what he does for a living. And I was like, I want to give him something. And he said, you think he's going to take something from you? You're crazy. They wouldn't take any help. I said, he's selling chocolates. You can buy some chocolates. So I bought some chocolates and some candy because he has this small counter where, like, where small box actually that he sells things. So I bought some things and I had a small interview with him. 1 year after I left Gaza, Ibrahim was martyred in Masirat al-Tahrir holding the flag. And he became an icon even more because at that time his resilience, his perseverance, his independence, his like refusal of charity was something empowering, and it told you anything you wanted to know about these people. He has all the reasons to give up and he's not. He can take help, but he's not. He wants to earn it. And then he was martyred holding the flag. Without his legs, he was just going there just to claim his land with his flag. And I remember in the interview he was saying, Inshallah Shaheed. Everybody says Inshallah Shaheed in Gaza.
Was he optimistic when he spoke despite all that he'd been through?
With a smile, with a lot of love, with a lot of friendliness. And I had published these. But the thing is, today, Brahim, with his amputated legs, you know how many thousand children in Gaza have lost their legs and their arms? You know that in 10 years' time and in 20 years' time, they will all be Brahim. Brahim maybe was one of a few hundreds in this case in Gaza. I'm taking you to the human side. Today we are they speak about 20,000. These are the numbers as per the Lancet, the medical journals. So we're speaking about an army of such humans that are refusing to give up. They will learn how to wash, walk, produce, think, persevere, and stay in their land. So I would never forget Brahim Abu Thuraya, for example.
Really, how do you deal with all of this emotionally? This is a lot of trauma and stress, and when you witness something live, it leaves a long-lasting memory inside your mind, and you can physically see it every day. How do you get through all of this?
I think sharing is a lot of help. I think discussing it with people like you who would really listen and who would take the time and the effort to make that even shared with more people. I think this has always been my way of therapy. Yeah, and actually, when I grew up in my 30s, I was very open-minded to actually getting into therapy with a psychotherapist, and having these discussions and being open and humble enough to name your problems and put them on the table and dissect them and work on them is also therapeutic. But I think I don't have a line between me and what I do. So it's not a job for me that I need to release or like to take off and hang at the door and then enter into my safe zone in my life. That is different. No, for example, since the war started, since Tufan al-Aqsa started, I live on a clock that is very weird. So I wake up around 5 times per night where I watch the news, see what's happening, share something, and then maybe take back sleep. So I don't think I've had a deep sleep cycle for more than a year. And I don't want to, because some people can numb these feelings. I could take something, I could take a Panadol night and I would sleep. But I think the only way to process this is to actually let it flow through you. The denial of the problem doesn't solve it. The cover-up of the problem doesn't solve it. So if my brain is telling me to wake up because there's something I must say at that hour because 200 more people would be awake now and something really has to be known, I feel better in waking up and doing that rather than sleeping the night. Because the anxiety in the morning or the guilt is not going to be less painful.
At the end of the day, we are all human beings, and it can become extremely overwhelming, mentally, physically. sometimes it can even slow us down more than it can drive us through, because we need this break and we need to take a deep breath of fresh air. But yet, we all follow you on Instagram, on social media, so we see what your schedule is like. It seems like for Ghadi there are no breaks. So what's the secret? How'd you keep going?
I wasn't like that. In the early stages, I was really a procrastinating queen.
Okay.
And I still am in many things.
To some extent.
In many things. My own things, I always procrastinate. Like, I should be writing a book. I should have published 3 books by now. I'm holding this, or like postponing it. In the beginning, because I used to work, it depends on how your job schedule is. I used to write articles. So I used to gather my creative juices in the daytime, write in the nighttime, publish in the early morning, and then sleep. So I used to sleep maybe up until noon. This was back in the day. When I started being a reporter in Al Jadid television in Lebanon, I had to wake up in the early time and be like up to my field mission. So I started being a 9 to 5 person, a little bit more. But sometimes you'd be on a live coverage and you'd be a 24-hour person. And then when I started the war correspondence on my own, or these trips like Gaza, I would go and not sleep and not stop for like 3-4 days and then come back home and like be in a bear situation, kind of hibernation for 3-4 days, and then wake up and write. And I used to manage this wasn't sustainable when I started having a company and having responsibilities. And
you need to be more time organized.
Yes, and I think that the key point is that you do like 2 things that you always do in the same time, and then you fix everything around them. Because in me, some women in my age, they have children or a household that would actually organize their life. For me, I have no one to wake up to. So I don't need to take someone to school. I don't need to make dinner for someone. I don't need to make arrangements for any gatherings. So if I lose control, I can. Mm-hmm. So for me, workout is the skeleton of my... It's the skeleton of my... I take my gym with me wherever I am. Like, even if I'm in a hotel room and I don't have a gym, I would do body weight workout and I would do a workout. I need to wake up like that.
Okay, Ghadi, as people, we all go through different experiences, and we always need someone by our side to get through these experiences. Sometimes it's a partner, it could be a parent. Some people are spiritual and they have God. And I think we've seen that specifically in this last war. Who is it for Ghadi?
God, always, God Almighty. He's always been there, guiding, and this is not to be dismissed at any time in this conversation. But when it comes to the other person, I think I've always had someone, but I've never had someone. And I think sometimes you reflect what you need on the other person that you have. Sometimes it was a friend or a sibling or a parent or a partner or a lover. My need is one, but sometimes you take it from a friend, sometimes you take it from a family figure, sometimes you take it from a mentor. It doesn't really have to be given to you from a lover or a mom, So I think I've always had this role in my life of people there for me, financially, mentally, teaching me, guiding me, elder people, wiser people. I've always had a tribe. Sometimes it would be, if I want to call them now, if I want to name them, at a certain point of my life, it was my friend Shadan, an older woman. At a certain time of my life, it was my brother Firas, or Hisham, or my dad, or a man I loved, or a colleague that was there for me, or, so I don't think there was only one person but you always need a mirror. The mirror is someone who loves you enough to tell you when you're doing something wrong. And I think there were many people, I'm blessed with many people in my life that have been with me in my ugliest and in my toughest times. When I was being my craziest, they would accept me and not judge me and not retract or take distance or make formalities with me. Some people, when you hurt them, when you're hurting, you hurt the people around you. You don't hurt. So some people, when you hurt them, they want to keep you in their life, but they just take a distance. These are people who do not really care for you. They care for what they get from you. The people who care for you, they go through the ugliest situations with you, and they keep the ground of sincerity, and they remain the mirror even if it's ugly. Some people, they just hide the ugliness in this relationship and just changes. And I think I've had people in cycles in my life. I was never alone.
Who's a mentor for Ghadi? I'm sure you have many, if I'm not mistaken. I don't want to make an assumption, but if it had to be one person that you knew or you didn't know.
No, if I didn't know, the mentor that I read about and I was brought up to his ideas is untold Saadi, undoubtedly. And in my life, in my personal life, many people were mentors at times, in journalism, in literature, in independence, in, you know, sometimes maybe you can be my mentor in a world that I have no idea about. Your mentor doesn't have to be an old person. Sometimes, a lot of times in many conversations, I see my nieces as mentors.
Wow. Last two questions before we go on to what people want to hear, your political perspective. And these two questions are going to be about journalism and you. If you could report one story today from world history, what would it be?
Nakbe.
Okay. Palestine.
Yeah.
There's one story.
Of course, I want to see what the Haganah were doing. I would want to report exactly how they entered and they killed like savages, how the exodus happened, how the forced displacement happened, who was left there, who was raped there, who was burned there, whose land was confiscated. Of course. I think in our most recent history, this is the biggest calamity that has hit our nation.
We did a survey on you before we started this podcast.
Okay? Yeah?
One word to describe Ghadi Francis. And in the survey, we got 3 words that were commonly used by everyone. And then I want you to give me a word that would describe yourself. So the 3 words we got were political, journalism, and controversial.
I think I get that. Political and journalism, it goes without saying. Controversial has stuck to my personality to the extent where somebody sent me a ChatGPT summary about me that says I'm controversial. I think I have been controversial in many ways, and I didn't mean it. It's just it happens that my personality doesn't really fit together in a mold or in a label. So I have my own label of controversial. If you want to approach me as a woman, as an independent woman, as a career woman, there are some things that would mess that up. If you want to look at me as a Christian, politically, you want to put me in a certain camp, which I'm not in, as a secular. If we want to say I'm pro-resistance, as a secular, I'm going to fall back into a different camp from the people who are in Lebanon pro-resistance. So in general, I've always had my mismatches with the groups. And I take pride in it, Reda. You know, in my...
Being different.
No, in my book...
Having your own opinion.
In my book, I was even younger than you when my articles on Syria were gathered in one book, My Pen and My Pain, 100 Days in Syria. So the first sentence I put in the introduction in Arabic, كم هو جميل ألم المتمزق بين اثنين وحده الحر من لم ينتقي لنفسه موقعا محددا وخطوطا حمراء. I'm saying how beautiful it is, the pain of being stretched between two. Only the free are the ones who haven't chosen red lines or roofs, like glass roofs, glass ceilings for their ideas. So I take pride in not fitting in anybody's camp. What I think about, I say. If I'm wrong, I apologize. If I'm right, I think saying the word out there is worth taking the chances of being booed sometimes, or being fought sometimes, or being oppressed sometimes. I think I'm immune enough now to face the consequences of speaking up more than others. So I take it for myself to say the least acceptable reality. People want to be in denial all the time. The groups want to be in denial. They want to say that their group doesn't do mistakes. I'm always happy to be the flashlight or the light bulb that shows you the mistake of the people that you like.
I've loved just talking and listening to you about your personal part. Now I know there's a lot of people who want to hear the political part.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get straight to that. I'm going to be just straightforward as I can with the questions. In the early morning of October 7, 2023, Hamas did an invasion back into Israel, or occupied Palestine, as we would say. And on the October 8th, from the Lebanese front, Hezbollah launched rockets toward Shibaa farms. If I'm wrong or mistaken any of the information I've shared, please, I would like to be corrected. And since then, we have had a war for maybe over a year and 4 months or 5 months, is it? And close enough, we had a ceasefire first in Lebanon, and then I think after a month or some weeks, followed to Palestine. Where were you on October 7th? Do you have any recollection of receiving that news?
Yes, I was abroad actually. I was taking my aunt to her retirement gift to Europe. And I recall very well, I recall the sense of justice when I saw an Israeli soldier being humiliated. Because every day before that, every day of my life, I have seen an Israeli soldier weaponized, radicalized, humiliating or bullying a kid in Palestine.
Okay.
So the sense of the underdog without weapons, because I saw, there were images of people without weapons who were like dragging Israelis outside of their tanks. So, but I was skeptical from the first moment about why didn't this happen before? Because I was in Beit Lahia in 2013, so I wasn't really following the news like anybody else. I was like, okay, I've seen that place. If that could be done, why did we wait that much? And if that could be done, where are they? Because they were there. What's happening? Is this it? Is it the end of it? I wasn't really...
What did you expect?
I wasn't, some of the people were boasting about it. I think I was one of the very few people who are pro-resistance, pro-Palestine that were a little bit under the analysis mode rather than the celebration.
Because it was the beginning of all of this.
Other than that, I was really on my personal phone having fights with all my Western friends, whether they are artists, friends, musicians from France, they were like, how are you, you savages, you kill innocent people. I mean, people from France, people from America, all the people I have met during my decade of work were attacking me because Palestinians chose to do payback for 5 minutes after 77 years of oppression. So I was having fights, I was screaming, I was, it was on my personal, so I was fighting my fight with people I knew. And it took us it didn't take us 2 days until we started seeing massacres. So the idea was...
The Israelis retaliated quickly.
The Israelis, as usual, they didn't retaliate. Hamas is today stronger than the Israelis themselves. I could look at the exchange of the hostages and the psychological warfare. In terms of psychological warfare, you can ask the Israelis today, who do they think is more scary and more credible? Their Israeli army authority or the Hamas? They trust Hamas more. Because Hamas in the end did what they said. Israelis did not do what they say. They killed children. They didn't kill Hamas. They destroyed infrastructure, hospitals, universities, streets, homes of civilians. 1.2 million Gazans are homeless because of... So we go back to the same story. Who came first, the egg or the chicken? Whether its name is Hamas or Hezbollah, or red or green or lettuce or whatever the name is of the movement, the native people are always going to fight back, and they're breeding this fight generationally. The Palestinians are not going to change their mind or forget their land. So it's not about Hamas here. Israelis don't fight Hamas. Israelis want to annex more land, to annihilate more people. They want to kill as much as they can. This is why in the last moments before the ceasefire, they do massacres. And they did. Hundreds of deaths at once in Gaza. Thousands of deaths at once or injuries in Lebanon. Or the Ma'madani hospital, 500 deaths. The massacres in Al-Mawasi in Gaza. They don't fight Hamas. They tell you there was a Hamas militant and they kill 500 innocent people in tents. So what law of war, what war convention, what international law allows you to kill 500 people if you suspect there's a fighter amongst them? Militants are not even to be killed unless in the fighting zone, not in civilian areas. So the Israelis committed war crimes, genocide. I refuse to speak about 7 October as if 7 October is the actual thing. The actual thing is the Nakba, is the occupation of Palestine. And ever since, any action that the Palestinians do is forgivable, is applaudable, is supported, because they are natives, and the Geneva Convention and the international law gives them all the right to fight in all the means until the liberation of their land. So you cannot change the international law just because you are Zionists. This is why they've been struggling with the UN. If the Israelis were empowered enough, they would change the UN. They said the UNRWA is Hamas, for God's sake. They said it. They stood in the UNGA and they said the UN is Hamas. So they don't have a regard for international law. This is why they want to always spread their narrative. Do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn 7 October? What happened on 7 October? What happened in 1948 is what happened. This is where the story starts. Okay, everything else is not for me, you know?
Ghadi, since you said you were abroad and then I believe you came back to Lebanon at some point, and for the majority of your time for the past year and a half, you've been in Lebanon. You've been reporting more than ever on the story. You've been speaking about it daily, reposting stories and posts. Many journalists were killed during this war for speaking up against oppression or the truth. And at the very beginning, I won't specify the date because I don't want to be wrong, and in respect to those who passed away, I think we had 2 people from Al Mayadeen news channel in Lebanon on the border areas. They were killed by
and beforehand there was the Reuters, yes. Isam Abdullah.
Yes. So is there any fear? Was there any fear on your life within Lebanon speaking about this topic?
Some people had that fear for me. I didn't have it. I didn't think the Israelis got to that point.
With you?
With us. In Beirut, you know, and I don't think if they wanted to assassinate anybody, they are relentless. They can use my phone to track me and kill me. This is what they do. This is what the world allows them to do. I don't think I've been dangerous enough, Reda, but you know, people who love you and who care for you and who are abroad, they fear. So yes. My brothers, both of them live outside Lebanon, and both of them were really trying hard to force me to be outside of Lebanon after the martyrdom of Sayyid Hassan, because I was the first journalist to speak on that night. And I was like, we're not going to be defeated. They can kill us all. This is our land. So my stances were even higher, stronger than some of the conventional pro-Hezbollah figures.
But Ghadi, here's a good question for you. During this war, I think we can all agree it was a very difficult war on Lebanon and on Israel, on both sides. In any war, you have wins and you have losses. And after this war, the Shiite sect have said that they are victorious. And in Lebanon, بيقولوا انتصرنا. Now, in Lebanon, we have a division on this opinion, okay? And people say that those who say we are victorious or those who claim that they are victorious are somehow brainwashed. What logic can you put in front of that statement to back it up?
I think in every battle or in every game, your feelings are yours. Okay. If you feel that you are victorious, then you are. And if you feel that you are defeated and you gave up, then you are. In general. It's not a mathematics thing when it comes to this war. First of all, if you want to look at it, what is the game and what are the rules of defeat and of victory? This game is colonization and occupation and annexing land and annihilation and defeating and ending the resistance and changing the face of a nation, right? Were they able to do that? No. So in the histories, many of the people, I mean, capitals were destroyed in World War II, and they were spoken of as victorious. Because in the end, what is the defeat and what is the victory? It is what you consider the story is. This is a story of colonization. Since the Lebanese people in the southern towns are still on their soil, they haven't been defeated. Since the people who chose an armed resistance did not change their mind, they are not defeated. Since the actual 80,000 soldiers helped by Elon Musk and Starlink, by the NATO, by the US, by the UK, by the Arab and the Turks. Israel was helped by the whole world with 80,000 soldiers and all kinds of planes and drones for 66 days. And it wasn't able to annex, not even the destroyed borderline towns in South Lebanon. You tell me, what army in the world
Can withstand so much.
any army in the world can withstand the death and the assassinations of all their leaders, the siege, the world siege, and the internal local siege? Media-wise, money-wise, humanitarian-wise, they denied them everything in the war. Some people were forced out of their refuge. People inside Lebanon were not always happy and receiving. They were in a siege. They continued, they did their job, and they maintained the borders. So this is not what a defeat looks like. Now there is a difference between calling yourself it's a losing battle. It was a losing battle on many. You have great losses, but did the enemy actually get to their goals and to their targets? They had to do all that. They had to use all that with this impunity. They had to spend all this money on bombs and ammonium bombs, and like internationally prohibited kind of warfare was done on our children and our capital, and even from the north to the south to the Bekaa. And after all that, you still have a political party with like big bloc in the parliament that has a choice and that cannot let you even rule a little decision in Lebanon. And on the borders, you have all these martyrs and all these families that are there, that remain there, that will never be shoved away from the face of history. They will be in Jabal Amel. They stayed there, they remained there, they forced the Lebanese state behind them to go back there and to liberate these lands. Not one time, not two times, three times in history now, Reda. You are a son of the South, and you know, some people are rebuilding their homes for the third time. They're not going to change their mind. So I think it is not delusional to believe in yourself even when you are bleeding. No, it is actually the spirit of a Lebanese. We always say we are the phoenix from the ashes. This is the testing times of our nation. These are the testing times of our actual resistance that is more than the arms. The resistance in the spirit and in the ideas and in the dignity and in standing our ground after all these sacrifices.
You've been very passionate on the Islamic resistance, on the people of the South. I want to ask you a question. I'm going to make some statements before I do. Please correct me if I am wrong. Today in the English dictionary, the meaning of a resistance is a group of people who stand up against occupation, who stand up for other people's rights, and anyone can be a supporter of a resistance indifferent of their religion. But in Lebanese politics today, which is very multi-complex, I think we can agree on that. When you're with a specific sect or group or political party or even the resistance, it's tied to a religion in Lebanon.
Yeah.
Today, it's known that the majority of the supporters for the Islamic resistance is the Shiite sect within Lebanon. Okay.
Well, I'm not really responsible for the, I want to be polite, but for the ignorance of people.
Okay.
First of all, the resistance, if you want to go to the dictionary in physics, it's the actual reaction to force.
For sure.
So, in Palestine, in Lebanon, the actual natives that are being annihilated are from all sects.
Okay, but the question I do have is that you are of a Christian background. Today in Lebanon, it is unpopular in a sort of sense for someone from a different background to be supporting a different political party.
Yes, because we have ignorance in Lebanon.
I'll have to agree with you on that, but have you faced backlash
Of course.
on openly speaking about
Of
this
course.
topic? Have you lost friends? Have you received hate comments, death threats? What's been the reaction to your stance?
First of all, this is a narrative I want to disrupt and to destroy. It's not true. It's not true that resistance is for Shia. George Habash, a resistance leader born before Hezbollah, resisting before the birth of Hezbollah, is a Christian. Wadi Haddad is a Christian. Lola Aboud, a martyr, is a Christian. Anton Saade, a thinker, is a Christian. Atallah Hanna, the Bishop of Jerusalem today, is a Christian. Mundir Ishaq, the Reverend of Beit Lahem, is a Christian. The people inside Gaza, inside the church that was demolished and destroyed, are Christians. The people of Marjayoun and the people in South Lebanon whose lives were destroyed and livelihoods, and also they have been martyred in many places. We have a martyr called Joseph Ensur in one of the early days of the war. So this is not a Shia-Israeli fight. It's a Lebanese-Israeli fight. And everybody who tries to feed that narrative is serving the Israelis one way or the other, even if it's Shia himself. Because our problem is not that of an ideology or a sect or our problem is that of a land. They took our land. It's our land. They're killing our people. They're our people. They're taking and destroying parts of our Lebanon. It's nothing religious. It happens. It is so that the idea of resistance came exactly where the occupation was. And the occupation was in Jabal Amil, where the majority are of the Shia sect. And also in Jabal Amil, Al-Imam Musa Sadr and martyr Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah and many of the political figures and the leaderships led these people into more education and more indoctrination and ideology revolving about the idea of resistance. But that doesn't make the resistance Shia.
I understand, but there is that speculation within Lebanon, and this is what people want to believe. You've always been open and you have an unfiltered voice on your stance in politics, on religion, and you don't care for what people have to say. You strongly go with what you believe. The head of resistance of Hezbollah in the last over 30 years was His Eminence the General Secretary, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, who was martyred on the 27th of September, if I'm not mistaken, on the path through Jerusalem. It's been a very big loss. Martyrdom, though, in Islam is believed that the martyr is still alive in spirit, but just not in physical form. A lot of people take to the streets today that Nasrallah is instilled in their heart, specifically for the generation that was brought up before him. In your age group, you were brought up before Nasrallah. When was the first time you could remember watching him, falling in love with him, and a more important question on that topic, which is being a very social argument in Lebanon. Do you believe he's dead?
Yes, I believe he is martyred, but he will always remain alive. People like Sayyid Hassan do not die. Their ideas, their speeches, their teachings, their people, their spirit is invincible. It can never stop. You know, I see him in every tree in the south. I've said that previously in an interview. I see him in every flag, in every Lebanese flag, in every tree that is being regrown, in every in every person that is going back to their homes. This is the spirit of Hassan Nasrallah, and Hassan Nasrallah is a man that was destined at a certain point of his life to die. But Hassan Nasrallah, the idea and the leadership, it's never going to die in our people.
And did this push you even more on your journey? Fuel you?
I think because I'm coming from the ideology of a martyr, Anton Saadi, it didn't shock me. It didn't break my spirit. It just broke my heart. And it's just the loss that nobody wants to face. But I think it's time to grow up and hold the responsibility ourselves. There is an impossible logic that one person will free a whole nation. We have to all be enlightened enough, to all be consistent enough, to all be perseverant and passionate and angry enough to fight the ignorance, to spread the word, to spread the spirit, to restate the fact that they want to change or to erase who has this land, who owns this land, what's the nature of this fight. So I think Sayyid Nasrallah, I fell in love with him first in 2005. I was 15 years old, maybe 16 years old.
Did you ever try to contact him, communicate with him? Any interaction growing up?
No, I didn't. I never. I wrote a lot of articles to him.
Do you know if he's ever read any of them? Or...
I am sure he knows of me. There were several interactions on a personal basis with people from around his community. I'm sure that he really respects everyone that is from outside the camp. He has a safe spot for young women activists because he's a father of an only daughter as well. And I think in many ways I think this is the first time I'm ever going to say this. May his soul rest in peace. In year 2012, I was in such a position, I was doing some crazy things and dealing with the Syria and Lebanon and the people. And I think there was a certain point where he reiterated the need to protect me. He said, this girl is a very brave girl. She needs to be protected from
any outside danger,
from the media entourage that is trying to harm her. And he was speaking about his people. Okay. So he was always a father to anyone who was true to the resistance.
Yeah. Okay, Ghadi, I'm going to ask you one last question.
Time is up, man.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've interacted with many of the Southerners. You speak highly of His Eminence, the General Secretary of Hezbollah, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, of the martyrs. You're a voice for the people. Today, if you have to share one message to these three people, it's the people of Lebanon, more importantly, the people of the South, and last but not least, and most important, if His Eminence was listening to you right this second, what would that message be? English or Arabic, at your...
To the people of Lebanon, I would say, just hold your moral grounds. We are a community where if someone has a death in the family, we would all respect that. I think in every village, in every residential building, in every small or big community in Lebanon, people respect the death, respect the differences on days of death or days of feasts or days of, grand days that mark history. I really ask the Lebanese people to remain on their Lebanese moral grounds, to not be shaken by the propaganda, because millions of dollars are being spent on media to radicalize us. But we are not like that. You see these things on social media where people are being very mean to each other. It's not true. If you see them in the coffee shops, they're not like that. People are not like that. They are being taken there. So if I had one thing to say to my Lebanese countrymen and countrywomen, sisters and brothers, I would say, please remain you. We are Lebanon in its diversity, in its changes, in its challenges. We are people who are resilient enough to mold and to be, like, we have adversity. We have a different richness than anybody around us. Let's not lose the love we are built from and made from, especially in times of calamity. When your neighbor has a calamity, if you can't pray with them, if you can't be sad for them, at least respect their sorrow. To the people of the South, I want to say, you're humbling me. You're giving me more than I deserve. Your ways of expressing your love and your gratitude to me doing the bare minimum of my humanity makes me feel guilty. I'm not really deserving of how they reciprocate. And I think it makes my heart break even more because it tells you how much they have been denied their humanity by so many in our country. They see it as a big grand gesture if I just came and visited, where it's my duty to do that. So it breaks my heart how long they have been accustomed to being forgotten, to being left out, to being hated, to being stranded. And I just want to tell them, you are the pride of every Lebanese, of every free spirit in the world. What you're doing, the sacrifices that you have been giving to your homeland, decade in, decade out, since the 40s and before. It's an inspirational struggle, Reda, not only for us Lebanese. It will be inspirational for humanity. Jabal Amel is the land of the revolutionary of the righteous revolutionary that would never give in, regardless of how much they have to suffer. As for Sayyid, I've been asked, time and again during this period, because it's around the funeral. Yes. If I could speak to him heart to heart, I would say.
Say it in Arabic.
Yeah, I know I can say in English. I say we would never be ready. Nobody is ready to depart their father, even when they're of old age or when they're sick. To us, you were a father. More than you are a father in the struggle for everyone who's in need and in pain, and you were the actual articulation of righteousness in our lived days, and I know there would never be a time where we would be ready to say like Sayyid Nasrallah is a shaheed, but unlike what everybody's saying, I want to say you can rest in peace and in power, because we are all going to be as sincere, as faithful, as strong, as determined as you brought us up to be. So it's time. This kind of life shall not be ended in anything less than this martyrdom. And you have left a people of free spirits that is willing to fight and never give our land to anyone.
Thank you, Ghadi.